Hey everyone, welcome to the Slice of Finance podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is the CEO and founder of Visbanking, Brian Pillmore. Brian, how's it going?
Jared, thanks so much for having me. Good to be with you.
Great to be with you. One of the few times I've had guests on here that it's not just a virtual conversation. You and I, probably a couple months back, had coffee. We got to chat in person, which was great. And I'm excited to do this because I feel like we already have some good rapport.
Absolutely.
Um, let's dive right in. Tell the audience about yourself and kind of give us that Visbanking overview, and then we'll talk some more.
Yeah, I hail from here in Oklahoma City, but grew up and down the East Coast and overseas, and went to school at Virginia Tech. I was kind of a late bloomer in terms of getting involved in the banking industry. I had kind of a career before that in product development and then eventually in finance. Um, so launched Visbanking. I say that I got laid off before it was cool to get laid off in January 2020. Before everybody else was losing their jobs in March and April from coronavirus. I was laid off. They eliminated my job as part of a bank that I was working for and their cost cutting measures. And I took what was a back burner project that I wanted to build as the president of a bank. I wanted to build a tool that I wanted to use. So I moved that back burner project, an idea that I had a passion for, from the back burner to the front burner, and launched Visbanking in January of 2020.
With your background, it really is. It's a awesome background because you went from being on that product development side and engineering to starting Visbanking. Could you share maybe how that early career in engineering influenced your approach to banking and financial services?
Yeah, it's when you go to engineering school, you learn a problem solving framework. You learn lots of other things, plenty of nerdy things, but the real thing you should walk away from engineering school is a problem solving mindset about how to define a problem, how to understand the assumptions, how to find a solution and implement it. Um, and I was working for a really big company called General Electric, and that was right out of school. Like, graduated on Saturday, started work on a Monday, and I was in a small team. We had a lot of engineers at that location, about 120, but I was in a small team of 5 people, and we were developing hardware and software that went into factories to automate factories. And it was interesting to see the product development life cycle, from the idea to understanding customers' needs, um, you know, defining those needs and defining how we would build a product around that, and then eventually building it and releasing it and getting customer feedback and then making changes. That kind of product development life cycle and really the customer engagement. Most of the 100+ engineers in our group didn't have direct customer engagement. The little group I was in was doing smaller developments that were sort of dictated by customers. So I think I very early in my career knew what it meant to hear the voice of the customer, which I think is something, whether you're a startup or a mature business, whether you're behind the scenes developing products or whether you're the sales guy in the front end, listening to customers is everything, right? Like a guy that I work for, he said, nothing happens into a business until somebody sells something. And I got that view early on. I might have stayed an engineer, had careers progressed a little bit more quickly where I was living, but I lived in a really nice place and no one ever moved. So there was never any opportunity created by turnover, or very rarely. So if I wanted to become a leader within that business, it would be like a 10, 15, 20 year time frame. And my boss wisely kind of informed me of that in about year 3 of this engineering job. So I decided to make a change into a different function, still working for the same company. I think that's like a beautiful thing of working for a huge company, is that you can shift job functions, you can shift, almost have multiple careers in the same company, and yet your paycheck's still coming from the same payroll service center. Um, so that's what I did. I moved into finance and accounting. I took one accounting class at a community college that actually met at night in a high school, so like night school for accounting. And I learned debits and credits. I did okay in that little accounting class, um, and then went on to work for 3 years as an internal auditor. I say that that was my version of an MBA. I never went to business school, but that was my version of an MBA of working in 10 different GE businesses over 3 years and leading eventually in that last year, leading teams of auditors across financial services businesses. And that 3 year period is exactly when I was exposed to banking.
Let's talk about. Uh, so thank you so much for sharing more about your background too. It's super unique, and I think those things early in your career have helped you a lot in this space. When you look at Visbanking, it's described as kind of pioneering a new era in banking strategy with bank intelligence and action with your bank intelligence and action system. Can you explain to those unfamiliar how bank intelligence and action system, like how does that differentiate from the traditional banking analytics tools today? I think our audience would really love to hear that.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't only apply to banking or financial services. It's interesting. We've come through like multiple phases of, call it, data science or business intelligence. And probably like the early 2000s version of business intelligence is like, hey, I want a fancy, colorful dashboard to look at, pulls together information from different places and helps me to make decisions. And the decision is the lighter part of the process. What we envision something different, where it's not just like dashboards that are cool to look at and tell you interesting things, but instead it's almost like data modules that drive you to action. Like the action or the outcome that you ought to be headed for is a natural. It naturally flows. So that's what we mean when we say like an action system. So it's not passive at all. And so what we've built is, first of all, from the ground up, January 2020 started off building with a brand new foundation. We gather data from dozens of data sources, and some of those are daily, weekly, monthly. A good chunk of them are quarterly because that's when banks report to the federal government all this data. And we have data going back 30 years. And like any good government data, that's not the only kind of data we have, but it does represent a good piece of it. It's always well organized, right? If the government puts it together. No, absolutely not. It's the worst organized data under the sun. And if you were to spend your valuable time, or a financial services leader spends their valuable time on it, they would be wasting that time. So we don't do anything manually. We actually have a dozen data scientists that have organized that data to be conformed and transformed into a properly refined data set where you can answer lots of questions and you can drive a lot of actions. So that's what we built. 30 plus years of data, different frequencies of data updates, but it's actually different than our competitors in the sense that it's all gathered in an automated fashion and then it's presented visually. That's why we call it Visbanking. It's like visualized, and we think you should see it. And then actually we have these modules, whether it's a customer and prospecting module or a talent sourcing module to find talent within the industry, or a people search module, or a non-performing or a credit quality loan module. Those types of modules allow a user within our platform not only to see, oh, well, who are the people in the industry, but if they're searching for their next teller, their next loan officer, their next chief credit officer, or their next CEO of their bank, they could find that talent, not only find the talent, reach using our platform and their own email system, reach out to the talent, establish a connection, and hopefully hire great talent with less time and effort than they're doing using their traditional method of post and pray on a job board.
When you look at, under your leadership, BizBanking has utilized something like over 5 billion
Yeah.
records over a 30 plus year period. What are some of the most surprising insights from that large amount of data that kind of have been revealed to you in this banking industry?
Yeah, I kind of sometimes I take some of these for granted because I live and breathe them each day. But one shocking one I always tell people is the banking industry has gone from 1984. There were 15,000 banks, and we've collapsed to 10,000 banks about 10 years ago. And today we have 4,600 banks, about 5,000 credit unions. But let's talk about the banks for a second. From 1984 to now, there's been the same number of employees at these banks. That's kind of weird to me. Like, we have this huge consolidation that people are talking about, like, oh, the number of banks are getting, fewer and fewer. I don't think that that trend will continue, but who knows? We don't really know what will occur. I do think that banking services and a bank branch model and so on, that will change more in the next 10 years than it has in the last 30. So that's one thing. I think the devil's in the details with the things that shock me. So you see headline news about, like, oh, the bank's loan growth is stagnant. Well, that might be true on average, but when you really drill a layer down, whether you're looking at different segments like the national banks or the super, we group them into these groups that actually tell you about their size. Like, you have national banks, super regional banks, mid and large regionals, small to mid regionals, then large community and small community. So when you break the industry down that way and you start looking under the covers, you say, oh, there's actually a different dynamic. Like, during there's been actually some flight of assets from some regional banks, and people have actually moved up to national banks and super regional banks, and also they've moved down to some community banks. And so you can see those at different time frames, and you could also look at things like the PPP loan program. Well, who was kind of ramped up to do that? Who benefited the most from that within the industry? It wasn't the national banks. Surprise, surprise, right? It was some regionals that were nimble, and certainly a lot of decent sized community banks that that were connected at grassroots to their community and were the hands and feet of the PPP program. So those are sort of things that I see when I look at the data, and I'm always amazed. Like, I tell people the secret sauce of the economy in the United States that most people don't recognize are these 4,600 banks, 5,000 credit unions. Like, they make the economy tick because they're right in your backyard, and there's nothing else like it in any other country in the world.
Now, you've held a variety of roles across the financial sector. So you've really had the opportunity to kind of see the various angles that exist in the system. You kind of already mentioned it partly, but what do you see as the biggest challenge that banks face today, and what's your advice for them to be able to overcome that?
Yeah, I think it depends on which banks we're talking about. I think it's really, really hard if you're a sub $250 million community bank today, with all the different risks coming at you, and with your limited resources and limited scale. It's really hard to make a living. And that's more than half of those 4,600 banks. That's a situation they find themselves in. So I do think we're going to continue to see consolidation. The winners are going to be the banks that either merge with those, or the question is, do they need to merge, or are there going to be more portfolio and asset sales than there have been in the past? Of course, the dynamic of credit unions acquiring banks is off to a record pace for this year, and if it continues at this trend here in 2024, it'll surpass the trend from 2023, where I think there were 16 banks that were acquired by credit unions, I think, last year. Um, Digitization is super important. Banks, to think about it, banks are most of the people that are running banks that have elevated themselves to leadership within banks. They came from the relationship side. whether they came on board as a teller and were face to face with customers and have worked their whole career up to the rank of decision maker within a bank, or maybe they came in as a loan officer or a credit analyst or whatever. So most of them, if they have to lean in one direction, they're going to lean towards relationship and not lean towards process and systems. But to win today, you have to be efficient, and you better have your processes and systems in order. Uh, and as banks grow, they have to achieve efficiency at scale. And so I think that's where like people are frustrated when they walk into a bank today in the age of mobile phone applications. They walk into a bank and they can't open a bank account on their mobile device, or they go into the branch and they start filling out paperwork. Or the one I go to, you start signing documents, at best electronic documents that you're signing in the branch on this little keypad. And you're wondering why in every other part of my life, if I have to sign a legal document, it comes DocuSign. If I need to open an account or create a username or whatever, that all happens by connecting my Google or Microsoft account or whatever. I just connect it and it's like single sign in. That's where banks have so much room to grow.
Don't get me started on on that. It's even my personal CPA that I used, or the one that I used last year for taxes. Like, send me a check, or sign this paperwork, and if you want to bring it over, let me know. Like,
Yeah, it's
it's
nuts. It's
it's
crazy.
2024. E-sign everything.
That's why you have like the UK bank Monzo. You saw like how quickly they've acquired millions of customers, and they have the valuation to show for it. Uh, think about the shifts in market share accelerating because the next generation, yeah, maybe you got grandma and grandpa's old checking account today as a community bank, but I hate to say it, grandma and grandpa are not getting any younger. And there's a huge wealth transfer that has occurred and is occurring. And the next generation doesn't want that. So I think we'll see in the next 10 years enormous shifts in market share. Anybody that doesn't have their act together in this arena, it's over. It's game over.
Yeah, let's just continue to innovate. This doesn't matter what industry you're in, but let's since we're focusing on this one, innovate. And I've used multiple bank accounts too. It's like it still amazes me that the Chases of this world offer you like nothing on your money, and then you have like Marcus who and all these other ones and Ally. They're the 5% plus, right? Because that's in line anywhere. Any bank right now should be giving you 4 to 5%, right? Is kind of the
Absolutely.
minimum. And I think Chase is still like 0.5% or something like, or less than
Well,
that, right? Maybe
and
point.
they know they don't have to, right? Because
Yeah,
the deposits stay there, and they know that they offer some other things at
yeah.
Chase that make it sticky. And I always say that consumers and business people are fundamentally lazy. And so I said this like when deposits started to move around from community banks to regional banks and so on, and every banker today is hunting for deposits, whereas 5 years ago they didn't even worry about it. Um, it's very very difficult to find a new deposit today, and you're gonna have to pay for it. And sorry to say, the raw materials of banking do not come free. It's just, and that's how I think of it as like a product development guy that's comfortable on a factory floor, worked in lots of manufacturing businesses. If you want to think about banking in that way, deposits are the raw material of banking. And for a long time, I think it wasn't good long term to have banks essentially have free raw materials. That's not a healthy industry.
Well, I'll tell you what. If so, first business, I used Chase for my business account, and like you said, they didn't do a bad job. It wasn't bad. Like, second business, I use Mercury Bank, and it is the best UI. It is so easy. The notifications for wires, everything, right? The perks that they give me, man, the consumer banks better hope they don't decide to do something consumer focused, because I will switch in a second. Now, what they can take from Mercury is see how Mercury really invested in technology and helping you integrate kind of what you want into it. They have all these different perks. Like, it's kind of amazing to me too that for many banks I can't log on and I don't get some perks. I don't get like
Yeah.
beyond my percentage. Like, go out, build out that internal kind of biz
Yeah.
dev team and give me some other stuff. You know, occasionally, oh, switch here and we'll give you the $200
Yeah.
if you put money in your check. And also, it's not like a insignificant amount of money you usually have to put in there. They want like a decent chunk of money in there
Right.
for like several months, right, before I get that $100 bonus. But it's I think so. This is actually ties in well with my next question I wanted to ask you, right? Wouldn't be a podcast, wouldn't be content today if I don't ask you about, okay, when we talk about banking's innovation, what role does AI have in that?
Yeah, I think it has a big role, and I wouldn't limit that. I had this conversation last night. I think like getting removing ourselves from the word AI and focusing on what exactly, what technology within underneath the umbrella of AI are we talking about? So I would say, if you're a relationship focused banker and you're still writing every email by hand and trying to tailor it to your customer and so on, shame on you. Like, you can use a large language model for this purpose, and you can generate those very personalized emails, create a spreadsheet of, you know, customer information, and then feed that to a large language model and have it produce very tailored emails that are going to resonate with your clients. There's one example, and I'll put that under the umbrella of AI, but specifically large language model. But then it doesn't stop there. We got to go into, let's say, credit modeling, right? So, credit modeling, you're really looking at how is this loan going to perform? Or maybe beyond the loan, how is this portfolio going to perform? This is not statistics 101 anymore. We don't have to take linear statistical approaches to how this loan or this portfolio is going to perform. We have machine learning. We can feed historical data and all the current data in, and we can have a model that tells us how this thing's going to perform, and that model's back tested. And we can see, like, we can study any of this stuff, and we can apply modern machine learning, whether it's a complex. Let's say you're doing specialty lending in automotive, for instance, and let's say you have 100 pieces of information about the borrower and the loan. You could feed that into a model, train a model with historic performance. Maybe it's some type of neural network, and then you use that model going forward, and you retrain it every quarter with new and fresh data, and retest. So I put that under machine learning. We could go on. I think it's a question of where are you within the functions of a bank. Oh, I'm frontline. I'm relationship management. Oh, I'm portfolio management. I'm in credit decisioning. Whatever department of the bank you're in, you probably need to think about what tools are you using today that are probably outdated. Probably, and you need to kind of educate yourself a little bit. And the regulators are on this. Like, they're looking at AI compliance. It's a focus of the FDIC at the moment and other regulators, AI compliance. And they want to know, like, right now they're scratching the surface. Like, hey, are you putting customer data into a large language model that's publicly available, or do you have private large language models that segregate customer data and so on? Those are elementary questions, and hopefully you've got your tail in gear on that. But the more complex thing is, how do you apply other artificial intelligence technologies? And like the CEO of NVIDIA said, the cost of computing is actually approaching zero. So are you using large computing power to your advantage to answer questions from a machine rather than through some human analysis?
What's next for you, Brian, and for Visbanking,
Yeah.
as we look out
This
or ahead?
year, we're really focused on moving Visbanking from business intelligence and sort of executive decision making actually to the front end. So we're spending a good chunk of our time on customer and prospecting data. So we want to be able to tell banks more about their existing customers and about their prospective customers. So we've built out, we have lots of data on banks. Now we're building out the data set, and it's actually an order, probably two orders of magnitude larger than our banking data on the commercial customers for the most part that are out there that banks want to do business with. And that's big. I mean, and I think it's going to, whereas sometimes I feel like, bankers are kind of slow to make decisions. Sometimes you feel like sales within our industry is like pushing a rope. When we get to the front end and we start to have those conversations and it's about winning new business for the bank, their eyes light up, right? Everybody is out looking for new business right now.
My last question for you, Brian, is what motivates you?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought I'd be in banking. So what I like about banking is that every day is a new day, and the variety comes from the fact that banks are they're a part of the economy that touches every consumer and every business. And so I'm an infinitely curious person. So I like variety in my day. Um, and I think that's what gets me out of bed every day. Like when I worked as a banker or now within biz banking, I never had a day where I woke up and I was like, oh man, another one of the same old days. I like the variety. I like self direction as well. I've talked a lot about that with my friends, and that kind of makes me tick. It's like being self directed and having both time freedom and also like the strategic freedom to decide which direction I go.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate you joining me here today and telling your story, and look forward to continuing the conversation with you. But thanks again so much for being a guest here.
Thanks so much, Jared. I appreciate all the time, and of course, good to connect with you virtually. And it'd be great to get together in person next time I'm in Florida.